Prime Minister Netanyahu, end this blockade now and let the aid in.
Gaza came up and I said, we gotta be good to Gaza. Those people are suffering. We gotta be good to Gaza.
And I want to put on record today that we're horrified by the escalation from Israel.
We have to help also out the Palestinians. A lot of people are starving on Gaza.
Since October 7, 2023, the West has watched Israel reduce Palestine's Gaza to rubble, kill tens of thousands of civilians, block countless aid deliveries, and use food as a weapon of war to starve besieged Palestinians, acts that all amount to war crimes. Yet, Western pundits and leaders have only regurgitated paltry condemnations. But now, after 20 months of non-stop carnage, might their tone be shifting?
I think it is without a doubt true that Israel has committed war crimes.
You wouldn't have said that at the podium.
Yeah, look, because when you're at the podium, you're not expressing your personal opinion. You're expressing the conclusions of the United States government.
For 20 months, Western media indirectly enabled the continuation of Israel's genocide in Gaza by failing to show the reality on the ground and parroting Israeli narratives and propaganda. Some of those outlets now seem to be starting to question whether they're legitimized, and some even appear to be pivoting.
I have resisted going as far as you have done in your criticism of the Israeli government. I resist no more.
So the question is, why now? Is it guilt, fear of history's judgment, or political expediency? A desperate attempt to salvage credibility and dodge accountability? Let's dive in.
This is the presidency of peace. He's going to end the war in Europe. He is going to end the wars in the Middle East. And you know what? By the end of this all, we're going to have the Nobel Peace Prize sitting next to the name of Donald J. Trump.
Within the context of the Israel-Palestine conflict, the United States has, for decades, presented itself as a mediator, a so-called broker of peace. But behind the rhetoric, Washington is, under the terms of the U.S. Arms Export Control Act, legally bound to guarantee Israel's military superiority through the country's qualitative military edge. That means Israel gets a seemingly never-ending supply of U.S.-made arms, bombs, military equipment, billions in aid, and diplomatic shielding at every turn.
And who opposes peace?
The Pentagon, Mr. President, just lifted a hold on 2,000-pound bombs for Israel, which was blocked by Biden. Do you have a comment on that, sir?
On the what?
On the 2,000-pound bombs that Biden had put a hold on?
We released them.
Yeah.
We released them today, and they'll have them, and they paid for them, and they've been waiting for them for a long time. They've been in storage for a long time, but we released them today to Israel.
Why did you do that, sir?
Because they bought them. No one in history has ever stood with Israel and the Jewish people like I have.
For decades, Washington's support for Tel Aviv has been bipartisan and unquestioned.
We stand with Israel.
We are fully supportive of Israel's right to defend itself.
Presidents came and went, but allegiance to Israel was the one uninterrupted continuum. In mid-May, reports started to surface that President Trump was frustrated with Israeli PM Netanyahu's failure to cooperate with the US to end the war in Gaza. The original report indicated that Trump and his administration were fed up and had simply had enough of Netanyahu's refusal to align with Washington's vision for the region. While the headlines make it sound like the two leaders were on the verge of a breakup, experts aren't buying the rhetoric.
These rumors are actually irrelevant.
It's a kind of moderation of friendly criticism that will not have any tangible impact on Israeli defiant policies, particularly since Trump has reinforced the unconditionality of the American commitment to Israel.
What matters is whether Israel continues to get the weapons and whether it continues to get the political support and the diplomatic support to carry out this genocide.
When Bernie Sanders put forth a resolution saying, let's stop sending bombs that are used to kill people every day in Gaza, we only had 15 members out of 100 members of the Senate who agreed with that.
Trump has also taken certain steps in recent weeks that allegedly rattled Netanyahu, like opening talks with Iran over its nuclear program without Israel's involvement and negotiating a ceasefire deal directly with Hamas. So, could this be Trump's way of tightening the leash on Netanyahu in an attempt to exert control over him?
The real question that will distinguish whether we have a situation where the tail, meaning the Israeli regime, wags the dog, the American administration, or is it a case where the owner of the dog, the United States, is having a tight leash on that dog, which is Israel? This is a moment of truth.
It's too late to stop them in a way, because you've let them loose for so many years that you don't have the mechanism to control them.
The real question now is this all part of a calculated, optics-driven move on Trump's part to placate voters and quell public dissent over Washington's support for Israel as Tel Aviv implements a policy of mass starvation in Gaza?
Well, I don't think Trump is actually distancing himself from Netanyahu's government. In the end of the day, the Israeli occupation is fully supported by any American administration. All you're seeing is good PR out there to show that Trump is angry, doesn't like the way they're moving.
People are not going to put up with this starvation policy, with this destructive policy, where dozens of people have already died because of starvation, with thousands being threatened.
Recent polls indicate that public opinion is shifting in the US, with support for Israel having dropped to record lows, especially among younger Americans, and this mounting frustration has reverberated on the streets, in parliament halls, and across social media. But to the Trump administration, it's just noise. Noise that has no impact or influence on Washington's backing of Tel Aviv, especially with US House Speaker Mike Johnson set to travel to Israel and address the Knesset on June 22.
The world is looking for action right now, and the only thing that's holding that back is the fact that America is holding the world hostage.
For the past 20 months, governments across Europe, notably several of the continent's old colonizers, France, the UK, Netherlands, Belgium, Italy and Germany, have sat on their hands. Recently, some of these nations seemed to be suddenly dialing back their long-standing, steadfast support for Israel. Some EU nations began calling for sanctions on Israel. And in May, France, a staunch ally of Israel, was pushing several key EU nations towards a motion to recognize Palestine as a state. The UK, another staunch ally, signaled support, planning an announcement that was to be delivered at the UN conference in New York on June 17.
If we abandon Gaza, if we consider there is a free path for Israel, even if we do condemn the terrorist attacks, we kill our own credibility in the rest of the world.
But are these public-facing announcements actual attempts to stop Israel's genocide? Actions indicate otherwise. France has been shipping weapons to Tel Aviv since at least 2018, with supplies continuing uninterrupted since the onset of Israel's war on Gaza in October 2023. Despite the UK banning arms exports to Israel in September 2024, it still supplies the country with about 15% of each F-35 jet, including critical components like laser targeting systems. Germany and Italy have also continued supplying Israel with radar systems and military equipment that it uses in its bombardment of Gaza. As far as recognizing a Palestinian state goes, the UK and France ended up walking back their recognition plans just 10 days before the New York conference was set to begin. So, was all the talk about a tougher stance on Israel just a charade, or was there something deeper at play?
That's because they are ashamed, they're embarrassed that Israel is just getting to a new level of depravity, including the starvation, and they just can't justify it anymore.
I suspect that it is a combination of the pressure from below, that is, the pressure from the disenchanted citizens of these countries, and the interest of the political leaders in establishing stability domestically and a measure of support politically at home.
The British people also have been in the streets across Britain, and I think at one point or another, the government would have to respond. But this is also a weak response. Why is it weak? Because it doesn't have any bite. It's a lot of bark, very little bite.
The reality is, Britain, Germany, the EU, they could literally restrict arms from getting to them. They could enforce a blockade where American aircraft couldn't even get to them.
But they chose not to.
They choose to stand at a podium and deliver some fancy speeches, but it's literally to cover their own masses.
Meanwhile, the UK has sent over 500 spy planes that hovered above Gaza between December 2023 and March 2025 to get a bird's eye view of the genocide as it unfolded, witnessing everything and doing nothing. So despite all the concerned speeches, concrete binding actions are nowhere to be seen.
We know that the rest of the world is with us, and we don't care if Europe is with us or not with us. It's the European money that we want to see halted. It's the European supply of weapons. It's the European free trade that we want to see halted. And that's when we'll begin to say that indeed Europe is with us.
But those steps still haven't materialized.
So it's their way of being able to have their cake and eat it too.
And that raises the question, what slice of the cake does the EU get, really? What does EU gain from its unwavering loyalty to Israel? The short answer, not much. The EU is Israel's largest trading partner, but the relationship is lopsided. Israel heavily depends on Europe for trade, with over 30% of its imports sourced from the EU, primarily in defense technology, while contributing just 0.6% to EU imports. In fact,
Europe doesn't need Israel at all. When you look at what it is that Israel is providing to Europe, it is absolutely nothing.
Except for one thing.
That it appeases their guilt. And they're forcing Palestinians to pay the price for the Holocaust that they carried out or that they ignored.
In financial terms, the guilt cost Germany nearly $39.3 billion when it signed a reparations agreement with Israel in the aftermath of World War II. The money helped build Israel's early infrastructure and economy, as well as its military edge. From that point on, Germany's support for Israel became an atonement policy, even a Staatsräson, or reason of the state. A never again that now apparently involves looking the other way when Israel commits its own Holocaust.
It was the guilt feeling and the repayment time kind of thing that the Zionists utilized and developed into what Norman Finkelstein calls the Holocaust industry, where they capitalize on this immense guilt feeling in European capitals. Zionism has, in a way, held the West hostage in a very deadlocked kind of grip because of Holocaust.
Norman Finkelstein, American political scientist and author of The Holocaust Industry, argues that Israel and its allies depict the Holocaust as the worst genocide ever committed and the only Holocaust the world has ever witnessed. This narrative has been used to portray Israel as a perpetual victim, to justify its aggression against its non-Jewish neighbors as self-defense, and to silence all criticism of Israel by framing it as anti-Semitism or somehow the denial of Jewish suffering. And under that shield, Israeli leaders have continued to expand the state's illegal settlements and entrench its brutal occupation as part of its racist settler colonial project, all carried out
to obtain their political goals. And that is to steal the land from the Palestinians and get rid of the Palestinian people, and to just the same as colonizers have been doing for hundreds of years from the global north against the global south. Kill the people, kill the women, kill the offspring, steal the fishing boats, burn down the villages, take the land, make it impossible to trace the people through the epistemicide, in order to say in 100 years, no, there was nobody here. No, what are you talking about? Palestinians? Which Palestinians? There was nobody here. We took the land, it was empty. It is a system so detailed in its devilishness that you could not have plotted it if you didn't have a master plan based on deep-rooted racism and supremacy. And I think that white supremacy and Zionism has a lot in common.
Is Israel a pariah state? Yes. Is Israel a rogue state? Absolutely. But the question for me is, when are governments going to recognize that? And when are they going to do something about it?
I think that it's unavoidable for Israel to become a pariah.
As Europe's half-baked rebukes and Washington's weak PR stunts allow Israel to continue carrying out its genocidal expansionism, a larger question emerges. Has Israel's lawless carnage and brazen defiance of international law turned it into a global pariah? From South Africa's 2024 ICJ case accusing Israel of genocide to widespread protests spanning the globe, a reckoning is unfolding, one that goes beyond the West. But what makes a country a pariah state? And does Israel fit the bill? Pariah states are global outcasts, and scholars point to 6 key traits: defying treaties by using weapons of mass destruction, supporting terrorism, lacking democratic governance, violating human rights, promoting radical ideologies, or committing acts of military aggression abroad. So, how does Israel measure up? First, the use of weapons of mass destruction. Israel has used white phosphorus, generally deemed to violate international humanitarian law when used in densely populated areas such as Gaza. It has also used thousands of US-supplied Mk-84 bombs, which are unguided 2,000-pound explosives that wreak indiscriminate destruction to effectively flatten Gaza, razing its neighborhoods and infrastructure and slaughtering thousands, including children, sheltering in tents.
Gaza's been decimated. We've seen that now Israel has practically flattened the largest Palestinian city, which is Gaza City. Israel has bombed each and every hospital. This is against the rules of international law, and it's against the rules of logic.
Second, supporting terrorism. In 1982, Israel's allied Falangist militia slaughtered up to 3,500 Palestinian civilians in Lebanon in what became known as the Sabra and Shatila massacre. The occupied West Bank also witnessed daily violent acts of terror, with more than 900 Palestinians killed since October 2023 by Israeli forces and illegal Israeli settlers, often armed and shielded by the state.
There's no way that this ends that doesn't leave Israel a pariah state with occupation and apartheid on borrowed time.
Third, the question of democracy. While Israel touts itself as the only democracy in the Middle East, its actions and laws suggest otherwise. Since its violent ethnic cleansing of Palestine in 1948 and its occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem beginning in 1967, the Israeli state has imposed a crippling blockade on Gaza, ongoing since 2007, as it continues to subject Palestinians to brutal military rule, discriminatory laws, extrajudicial surveillance, and mass incarceration. And within Israel, the government raised the electoral threshold from 2% to 3.25% in 2014 in an attempt to block the already underrepresented Palestinian parties from entering the parliament, the Knesset. Then in 2018, Israel passed the nation-state law, cementing Jewish supremacy as a constitutional principle by defining Israel exclusively as the nation-state of the Jewish people, with no mention of democracy, equality of minority rights, and downgrading Arabic, removing it as an official state language.
The whole world knows that Israeli settlements are illegal, they're against international law, they're even considered to be a war crime. You don't need to be an international legal scholar to know that.
Fourth, human rights violations. From deliberate starvation and the bombing of schools, hospitals and refugee camps to the killing of civilians, aid workers and journalists, as well as repeated violations of every ceasefire since October 7, rights groups say Israel's actions constitute flagrant human rights abuses.
Israeli occupation is already a pariah state. The whole world, outside of a handful of European nations and the United States, and by the way, the people in those nations actually see Israel as a pariah state. Their governments choose not to, and their governments continue to support ethnic cleansing and genocide and a Holocaust at this point.
Fifth, promoting radical ideologies. Despite being illegal under international law, Israel continues to expand and promote its settlement in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem, with state ministers proudly championing the annexation of Palestinian land, the expansionist vision to seize land they believe was part of Greater Israel and given to them by God, has enabled more than 700,000 settlers to illegally move into occupied Palestinian land since 1967.
Just the other day, an Israeli member of the cabinet was on an Israeli television station, and he turned to the camera and he said, "We killed 150 Palestinians just yesterday, and nobody is stopping us." For him, it means, let's continue. If nobody is stopping us, let's continue. So when you look around and you see that for 58 years, that all that Israel has been able to do is get away with murder, literally murder, it cements in their mind this idea that they can do whatever they want to do. And that's what Israel's been doing, is they've been saying to the world, try to stop us. Just you try.
Finally, military aggression abroad. Israel carried out military aggressions against at least 4 other countries in 2024, from its pager attacks in Lebanon, which killed 12 and injured at least 3,000 civilians, to its airstrikes on Syria, Yemen, and Iran.
There's no question that the large numbers of people are viewing Israel as a pariah state, probably the most severely perceived as such, at least since South Africa's racist apartheid state, and possibly since Hitler's Germany.
Israel continues to frame its actions in Gaza as self-defense against Hamas, but the reality on the ground tells a different tale. One that severely undermines any claims Israel has been making of moral legitimacy.
It is fair to say that Israel has endured this defeat in what I call the legitimacy war. And often these struggles are determined in the final stages not by which side has the superior military capabilities, but by the side that wins the legitimacy war. And in that sense, the Palestinians are winning the legitimacy war.
Yet, Israel has so far evaded the pariah status quickly assigned to others by the West. Russia's invasion of Ukraine prompted immediate Western sanctions, sports and culture bans, and widespread displays of Ukrainian flags across Europe and the US in an attempt to isolate the aggressor, Russia. In contrast, the West has failed to impose similar measures on Israel, even as it commits one atrocity after the other. While Western nations haven't officially designated Israel as a pariah state, it's unsurprising that it continues to back Tel Aviv, as pariah states often receive support, including advanced weaponry, from those who assign them the pariah status.
And that makes it extremely difficult to translate this pariah status into a political outcome that will achieve fundamental Palestinian rights, above all, the right of self-determination.
I think they're only going to do something about it when Palestine becomes an issue on the ballot box. When it's not an issue on the ballot box, when our global humanity is not an issue on the ballot box, then we're going to continue to see Europe behaving the way it is.
The world at the same time is waking up to these realities, and they are determined to stop it, because that's the moral thing to do, that's the ethical thing to do, that's the human thing to do.
In a fairer world, Israel's genocidal war would have ended long ago. But even after killing more than 55,000 Palestinians and reducing Gaza to ruins, Tel Aviv's staunchest backers have refused to impose any serious measures to hold the country accountable. Millions of people around the world are now stepping up and taking bold actions to try to stop Israel in its tracks in the absence of any concrete action by their own leaders. So will Western governments continue to support Israel, or will they cave to pressure and finally take action to stop Tel Aviv before it's too late?